What's up everyone, Big Dan here, and in this video, we're doing the ultimate Mass Effect romance tier list. Now I'm sure 100% of the people that watch this video are going to agree with every choice that I make on here, and no one will have any problems with this list at all. So, really excited to dive into this, and we're going to be doing just the original Mass Effect trilogy in this video, including all of the different flings. So let's start off with Ashley. So, I have a little bit of a bias towards the Ashley romance. It was the first one that I ever pursued in my first ever playthrough of these games, so I'm a little bit biased towards Ashley. As I've played through the game subsequently now, I've talked about this in past videos as well, Ashley kind of grates on me a lot more than she did in my first playthrough. In my original playthrough of Mass Effect 1, I was playing mostly as a Paragon, and I was able to sort of shift Ashley's viewpoint on aliens, so that seemed really cool. It was like you had this really interesting character growth with her. I didn't know how annoying she was going to get in Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 with the whole Cerberus stuff, but I still have kind of an affinity for this character's romance. It's not the best one in the trilogy, but it has an interesting arc, particularly with her trying to learn to trust Shepard again in Mass Effect 3, I guess. So I'm going to put Ashley in the A tier. So next up we have Kaidan. Kaidan's never really been one of my favorite squad mates in the trilogy. I think Kaidan has somewhat of an interesting backstory, but he doesn't really quite stack up to the other characters in the trilogy. I've only pursued Kaidan's romance as a FemShep character. I know that I believe he's also available as a gay romance in Mass Effect 3 for a male Shepard character. I've only done the FemShep romance, and I've never actually carried it through all 3 games. I think last time I did it, I either chose Garrus or Thane over him in Mass Effect 3, something like that. His romance is okay. I mean, it's kind of a similar thing with Ashley, right? Where it's the Vermeer survivors. They can kind of be annoying in Mass Effect 2 and 3 and how they're really shoehorned into this rivalry with Shepard. So overall, I would put, I think I'll put Kaidan's romance in the B tier. It's not awful, but it's lackluster compared to a lot of the other ones. So next up we have Liara. Now Liara's my homegirl. I really love the Liara romance as well, particularly with the Lair of the Shadow Broker arc. I find that to just be so perfect, and I think it's probably one of the best written romances in these games, so I think it's an easy candidate to put in the S tier. I think nobody's going to be surprised by that. Liara's romance is absolutely phenomenal. Easy S tier choice for me. Next up, we have Sha'ira the Consort. I always find the Sha'ira encounter really funny, particularly because the way you get into it is you do the quest for Sha'ira, and then she gives you a reward at the end, which is basically like her just giving you like kind of like a, what would you say, like an astrology type thing? And I mean, Sha'ira is basically like that chick who has crystals or whatever. But anyhow, the way you get into the romantic encounter with her is you basically go, well, that's it, and then she's like, all right, we'll do the deed. And it's just so funny to me. So I always like the Sha'ira romance. It's obviously just a single time encounter. It's not really a full-blown romance, but it's really entertaining to me. So I'm going to put it up here in the A tier. Next up, we have Garrus Vicarian. I've said this before. I think Garrus is the best character in the Mass Effect trilogy. Again, I don't think that's necessarily a surprising take. A lot of people love Garrus, and his romance is also really good. It's one that you can only start beginning in Mass Effect 2 as a FemShep character. So if you're used to playing as a male Shepard, maybe you've missed out on the romance. I know I didn't do it for a long time, basically. I played mostly bro Shepards for the longest time. But once I finally dove into this FemShep side of things, the Garrus romance became one of my favorite ones in the trilogy, so I'll throw it up there on the S tier as well. I don't think it's quite as well written as Liara's, and also because you can't start it in Mass Effect 1, it's a little bit less, it's less of an arc, in my opinion, but still one of the best romances in these games. So next up we have Jack. Jack is also one of the ones who I romanced in my first ever playthrough of the Mass Effect trilogy. And so again, I have a strong affinity for that character and that particular romance. I think it's really well written. It's really interesting because Jack comes off as this very rough around the edges character. She's kind of a hard ass and all that, but you can sort of get close to her and bring out a softer side of her that she's really hasn't been able to show to the world before. So I think that that's really interesting to have that sort of breakthrough with her character, and it makes that romance all the more interesting. Lately, in my more recent playthroughs, I've been doing the one night stand with Jack because I also find that to be hilarious. I think it's like one of the more interesting ones, especially because she does a callback to it in Mass Effect 3, which is really funny. But yeah, I would say the Jack romance, really good. I'm going to put this one in the S tier as well. I think it's really interesting to see that character arc with her, of her sort of showing her more vulnerable side and letting her guard down. And then also, of course, the one-night stand romance is really hilarious, too. So, Jack is S tier. Next up, we have Jacob, the Vent God. This is one who I've seen the cutscenes of the romance, but I've never done it myself in one of my playthroughs, and because I know the outcome, basically. So, for those of you who haven't done the Jacob romance in the Mass Effect trilogy, basically, he still gets with Brynn in Mass Effect 3, regardless of whether Shepard is with him or not. So he's basically the only character who actively cheats on Shepard and breaks off the relationship with Shepard. So there's even a cutscene during the Citadel DLC where FemShep slaps Jacob, which is really hilarious too. Because of that, and just because Jacob is like overall kind of a bland, somewhat dislikable character, we're going to put Jacob in the D tier. Again, I don't think that's particularly surprising to anybody as well. So again, Jacob is D tier. Next up, we have Kelly Chambers. This one's kind of interesting. If you basically flirt with Kelly in Mass Effect 2 and invite her up to your cabin, she can then become the automatic person who feeds your fish and keeps them alive in Mass Effect 2, so that's a huge benefit. It's a very good, like, friends with benefits style romance. You never really get to have more of a serious relationship with her. It always seems to be more of a casual thing, even though if you do see her again in Mass Effect 3, she expresses feeling like this closeness to Shepard. But I like the Kelly romance. I kind of wish that there was an opportunity or an option to grow it into like a more full-blown relationship rather than this sort of like more casual, I guess, encounter. But interestingly enough, the only way to get Kelly to show up in Mass Effect 3 at all with an imported save is to go through with the fling romance in Mass Effect 2. If you don't do that, she doesn't even show up in the game in Mass Effect 3, which is kind of wild. Definitely missed out on her character in my first couple of playthroughs of the trilogy. Overall, I really like Kelly as a character. I think she's good. The romance itself is not the deepest one in the trilogy. I'll put it in the B tier. We're going to put it ahead of Kaidan here, but overall, I think it's just not quite as fleshed out as some of the other romance arcs, and because of that, you got to dock it a few points for that. Next up, we have Samantha Traynor. I really like Traynor as a character. I think she's really interesting. She is only available as a romance as with FemShep. So if you try to pursue her with a male Shepard character, she turns you down in kind of a hilarious way, which is also entertaining. I think Traynor is one of the better characters who's added into the Mass Effect 3. It's very difficult to add new characters into a trilogy at the very end, but I think Traynor's one of the better written characters in these games. Her romance is pretty good. It's not the best thing I've ever seen, and again, it's so short. It's just Mass Effect 3. There's a couple of fun moments with her. Overall, though, I don't think it ranks quite as high as some of the other longer-standing romances in these games. So I'm going to put her also in the B tier, just ahead of Kelly. I do really like the romance between Traynor and FemShep, but perhaps if it had had time to develop over multiple games, maybe it would be ranked a little bit higher. So next up we got Miranda. I really like the Miranda romance. She's another one who, similar to Jack, is kind of standoffish to Shepard at the very beginning and takes a little while to kind of open up. And basically, you could start a relationship with her after her loyalty mission in Mass Effect 2. A lot of the Mass Effect 2 squadmate romances in Mass Effect 3 feel undercooked, so to speak. Like, you don't get to spend very much time with Miranda. I think they kind of rectified that with the Citadel DLC, but for a good chunk of the game, you're kind of just talking to Miranda in these very short conversations, and she's like on the run from Cerberus. It's like, I have to go, Shepard. But I like the apartment scene where she kind of has this heart-to-heart with Shepard about Project Lazarus, and, you know, overall, I think Miranda's romance is very good. I wouldn't quite put it up on the S tier, although I do kind of like pursuing this romance a lot in these playthroughs. But I think Miranda is a solid A tier, so I'm going to put her above Ashley. Again, don't get to spend all that much time with her in Mass Effect 3, and I don't think her character arc with the romance is quite as deep as, say, Jack, for instance. So Miranda's A tier for me. All right, next up we have Morinth. This leads to kind of a hilarious cutscene. Basically, your romance is with her because she's an Ardat Yakshi is one and done. Leads to a critical mission failure, which is kind of a hilarious Easter egg in these games. The only way to initiate it is, obviously, you have to side with Morinth in Samara's loyalty mission, which involves killing Samara, which is pretty intense. And then kind of have flirty conversations with her on the ship. Then after the final mission, once you've defeated the Collectors, you'll be able to basically proposition her, or she propositions Shepard, and you can be like, yeah, let's do it. And then Shepard just dies. It's fucking hilarious, but that's all there is to it. There's no real depth to any of it. Obviously, it's kind of thrown in as an afterthought, as a joke. So it's not the best thing in the world. I will, however, put it ahead of Jacob because it is really funny. Normally, I would throw this on the D tier, but I'm just going to throw it on the C tier because the comic factor of it bumps it up one letter grade, in my opinion. So next up, we have Samara. This is another one of the kind of pseudo-romances in the game. So starting in Mass Effect 2, there's like a very specific arc you need to take to even sort of get the ball rolling on this. I believe you can only do this if you're not in a solid romance with another character, and you have to play fully Paragon, or mostly Paragon. If you're a Renegade, this isn't even opened up to you. But basically, you can try to start a relationship with her, and she turns Shepard down. She's basically like, my life is for the just cause, or whatever the hell. And that's all there is to it. They do have a kind of like quick romance scene in the Citadel DLC with Samara, but her and Shepard never really form a romantic relationship. It's this kind of, they form like a bond, so to speak, but it never really goes anywhere other than just a quick smooch, I guess, in the Citadel DLC. So, like some of these other ones, it's because it doesn't really go anywhere super deep, other than maybe just opening up Samara's character a little bit more. I'm gonna put it in a C tier. So yeah, that's where the Samara romance falls for me. It's gonna be in the C tier. So next up we have Tali. I know it, you know it, we all know it. Tali's S tier. I'm actually gonna put her romance just below Liara's. Tali's romance is a lot of fun. It's the favorite romance for a lot of people in these games. Honestly, the only reason I would probably put it below Liara is just because I find the Lair of the Shadow Broker arc of the romance so satisfying, and the fact that Liara's romance takes place over all 3 games in the trilogy makes it a little bit more satisfying from like a writing and story standpoint than the Tali one. But the Tali romance is really interesting too, because obviously you know, she's on her pilgrimage in Mass Effect 1, just kind of like leaving home for the first time and seeing like other parts of the galaxy outside of the Quarian migrant fleet. You know, obviously comes to admire Shepard a lot, and then finally has like an opportunity to really express the feelings that she's developed for Shepard in Mass Effect 2. Also because, you know, she literally like puts her life on the line to romance Shepard because she gets really sick just from Quarians not having a very strong immune system. So yeah, I think Tali's romance is really interesting, and it's one of the better ones in these games. Next up, we have Thane. Thane's romance, I did it for the first time in my Renegade FemShep playthrough, and it's honestly really good. It's really satisfying. It's also really tragic, though, because Thane's obviously, he's dying in Mass Effect 2 when we meet him of Keprel syndrome, and basically starts this romantic relationship with FemShep at the very end of his life, and yeah, kind of, you know, is able to move on from his dead wife, so to speak, and form this connection with Shepard at the end of his life there. But yeah, it becomes very, like, tragic and heartfelt. The hospital scene with FemShep and Thane is, you know, extra heartbreaking. And then you get like a series of special messages from him in the Citadel DLC after the funeral that Koliot holds for him. Phenomenal romance arc. I'm gonna put it in the S tier. I think, you know, just the elements of him forming this sort of last connection before he dies is really interesting, and yeah, it leads to a really good, really well written romance in these games. So next up we have Diana Allers. I don't know, the Allers fling is pretty funny. I kind of associate this with a video that I've made, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I like the Allers romance. But basically, you can have a one-night stand with Diana Allers if you're not like in I think you have to be unattached or like not in another committed relationship for it to even be available. But you can have a fling with Diana Allers, like a one-night stand. I also kind of associate the Diana Allers romance with the Manslayer video.
Can't talk about this. If word gets out that I got too close to the source...
I'll make sure this stays just between us.
Thanks, Commander.
I'm kidding. I'll go tell the galaxy what we've done.
Ugh.
They could use some good news.
It's just one of the fling romances. There's nothing to it. I'm going to put it in the C tier. We'll put it just above Morinth. It's kind of funny, but there's no depth to it. There's really no depth to Diana Allers' character whatsoever. She's kind of shoehorned into Mass Effect 3, so it is what it is. Next up, we have Steve Cortez. His romance is kind of middle of the road. I've never personally done the Cortez romance in any of my playthroughs, but I have seen the cutscenes. And again, it's another one of those things where it's interesting somewhat because he's trying to move on from the death of his husband and whatnot. So I guess Shepard's kind of the rebound guy in that scenario. Only available for a male Shepard romance, by the way. But ultimately, it's just a one-game thing, and Cortez isn't the deepest or best-written character in the Mass Effect trilogy, so it ends up not coming across as the most satisfying romance when stacked up to all the other ones. That being said, it's fairly decent, so we'll just put it down here in the B tier, I think. It doesn't stack up to all the greats in the trilogy, but it's not too bad either. Okay, the last two we have are James and Javik, which are both kind of like fling romances in the Citadel DLC. So I believe James is only available to an unattached FemShep in the Citadel DLC. It's just kind of a fling scene afterthought that's kind of tossed in at the end, similar to the Samara romance in the Citadel DLC or like the Morinth romance. So I kind of put it in the same category. I think it's a C tier romance, not the best. It's, again, if they had created a romance with James for FemShep that would have progressed throughout the entire game, then perhaps they could have done something interesting with that. But I felt like they just kind of shoehorned it in there because James kind of flirts with FemShep throughout the course of the game. And they're like, let's capitalize on this in the last DLC of the trilogy. Yeah, it's just kind of a tacked on thing. Next up, we have Javik. Now, the Javik romance is really weird. It's a little funny. I mean, it's kind of thrown in as a joke. But the thing that's weird about it is it's not initiated by the player. It's triggered by the game automatically, which in an RPG is just really weird. It's one of those things where Mass Effect is all about making these choices, right? And so to have a romance or a one-night stand thrown in not at the choice of the player is really bizarre and kind of like out of character, out of pocket for the Mass Effect trilogy. Because of that, I would probably put the Javik romance in the D tier. Again, the only way this gets initiated is if you have a femshep who is unattached in the Citadel DLC and Javik is at the party. Then, at the end of the party, it automatically triggers a cutscene with no input from the player, no confirm or deny or anything. It just happens automatically. Again, I feel like it was thrown in as kind of like a joke, kind of an Easter egg. The scene itself is kind of funny, but it's also just very bizarre given that the player doesn't initiate it. So there you have it, the ultimate Mass Effect romance tier list. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to Big Dan Gaming. Big shout out to all the channel members for supporting my content. Until next time, this has been Big Dan. I should go.